Hi, my name is Meredith Changeux, and I'm going to walk you through MIT's Visualizing Cultures website, and I'm going to try to help you use it in your own classroom. I work at Vantage Point High School, and I've been there for 13 years. I teach social studies to kids who are in 9th through 12th grade. I've been teaching for 16 years, and I've actually been working for the program for Teaching East Asia since 2002, when I first started as a participant in a 30-hour seminar. From there, I went on an NCTA study tour to Japan, and from there, I actually served as a lead teacher twice, once bringing teachers to Japan and once bringing students. I also ran my own 30-hour seminar in the Denver metro area for 3 years, and I've worked as a master teacher in a summer institute on this website through NEH. I speak about this website at institutes and workshops and conferences all over the country. I've been speaking about it in Baltimore and Boston, in Kansas City, and in Denver. And I actually had the opportunity to develop curriculum for this website. So this is really exciting for me, and I would love to encourage more teachers to be using this website. My objectives for today are to familiarize you with the website, how you can use it, and how you can feel comfortable teaching students. Students actually do a really good job on this website, and those of us who are of an older generation struggle a little bit. So I'm going to try to help you work out the kinks so you feel comfortable. I'm also going to explore 3 specific units and show you how I've used them in my classroom and how easy it is to get kids engaged with this website. And then last, as I talk, I'm going to try to align my material and content with the Common Core standards. To access this website, you use the URL visualizingcultures.mit.edu. If you forget that, you can go to any search engine and punch in the words MIT Visualizing Cultures. I am suggesting that you use Firefox because it seems to work better with the Flash that's embedded in the website. Think of this website as a visually appealing digital textbook with 29 units. Each unit has the same components. There are essays that you can tab through, just like chapters in a textbook. There are printer-friendly versions of the essays that you can print out. There are visual narratives where a student can scroll horizontally through the visuals. And 9 of the units have lessons and curriculum. Most of the artwork you can actually click on as well, and you'll get a new window pop up with higher pixelated images for the kids to examine more closely. I'm going to take you to the website now. So I consider this page on the website to be my home base, if I can use a baseball analogy. And every place that you go on this website will always have this black menu bar with drop downs, and you can always come back to your home base. You can visualize these units through their icons, and you can pan over and see which unit it is, or you can access the units through a text view. That's how I choose to look at this website. Remember, if you ever get nervous or anxious or you don't know where you are, just come back up and you'll get to the home page. One way to get to the curriculum on these 9 units that do have curriculum is to go up to that top menu bar, go to the drop down, and click on curricula. These are the 9 units that have curriculum. And for each of the curriculum, when you get to this page, you're actually accessing the student version. So it's a very limited version. You need to scroll all the way down to click on the teacher's version to get everything you need to run this in your classroom. Let's click on lesson 1 here. We've aligned all of this curriculum with the National History Standards. We've got objectives and estimated time. We've got material and preparation, and you can click on all the material, and they should be in PDF or documents that you can manipulate according to the needs of your students. If there's a PowerPoint, it's embedded into the lesson. If there's links, they should be embedded in the lesson. And some of the lessons even have rubrics for you to assess the kids' learning. My first exposure to this website was the Black Ships and Samurai unit. It was John Dower's first unit that he built for this MIT Visualizing Cultures website. I brought my students to the Boulder Library where they had a traveling exhibit on the black ships and samurai. I got to participate in a roundtable discussion with John Dower too, as he really asked us authentically, how can I access your students with this website? Black Ships is a fabulous website that juxtaposes the artwork and the perspective of the Japanese woodblock print artists and the more formal American photographers and illustrators. Black Ships, being the first unit that John Dower created, has a really interesting element to it as he tried to juxtapose images throughout this unit, throughout all the tabs, as the Japanese and the Americans viewed this really significant encounter. This is really accessible to all kinds of learners. Even if you don't teach this time period, you can incorporate this lesson into a unit on language arts, a course on human geography, or East Asia geography. This unit asks kids to compare and contrast the primary sources and the different narratives that two cultures had on one exchange. This website has some really cool highlights I'd like to show you right now and try to hook you into this website just the way I do with my students. One way to think about this website too is to not just think about it in its content or its historical references, but also in the art itself. Some of the artwork in these units include the daguerreotype camera, early photography, tourist photographs, sketches and illustrations, woodblock prints, advertisements, watercolors, and propaganda. Japanese woodblocks, as they evolved over time, play a super significant role in a lot of these units and in Japan historically. It's really neat. So something you can do is show kids how to make a woodblock print. So this section of the website allows kids to see that on the right, there's a complete version of an actual woodblock, and on the left are the 20 woodblock components it took to line up to make that one woodblock. This is really neat, and this catches all kinds of students. And you can also pause it and discuss with them what they're seeing and how this works together. If I go on to the number 10 woodblock, I can see that the artist was looking at the blue in the water with the snowflakes dropping behind these two people. And if I shift to woodblock number 16, I can also see the gray hues in the sky with the snow falling as well against the weeping willows. This is a really neat opportunity for students to look at the art and not just the content. Another element I really like in this website is the Black Ship Scroll. The Black Ship Scroll, or imaki in Japanese, is a 30-foot long scroll that was actually kind of humorous at times, that documents the exchanges and the encounters between the Japanese in the port city where Commodore Perry stayed with his shipmates and the American shipmates himself. You can either watch the scroll unfold. Here it tells the story of how the Americans are interacting with the Japanese and how the Japanese are observing what's cultural and interesting and unique about the American shipmates. You can watch a variant on the theme. This is a Black Ship Scroll that's very similar to the one that we're accessing today. Or you can have students actually zoom in on specific scenes where the Japanese kanji is interpreted for the students to process. Let's look at two. The first one I'm going to show you takes about a minute, and it's a version of how Commodore Perry was perceived back in 1854 when he spends time in Japan on his second tour. Another snapshot we can take from the scroll are some Americans taking a daguerreotype camera and documenting some of the people they're meeting in Japan. Now, as you can see, if you're paying attention, some of these depictions are not that accurate. These are great questions to ask your kids as they engage with this scroll. How accurate are these depictions? What stories are missing? How does the scroll serve as some sort of time machine? The third element I want to show you is a cross-section of the Susquehanna. The Susquehanna was one of the coal ships that Commodore Perry brought on his maiden voyage to Japan. Here, kids get to see authentically what it's like to live on a ship and thinking about how many months it took to travel from the west to the east and what life was like on the ship. Something kids might find pretty humorous is section 11, where it says goats and poultry for food. And the other part my kids get a kick out of. You're in the bottom. I'm going to scroll backwards to the left. And the section 28, where there's bunches and bunches and bunches of kegs of alcohol. Here's some examples of the units that you can find on this website. Here are the 3 units I'm going to talk about with you today. The first one is Yokohama Boomtown, 1859 to 1872. These are vivid, gorgeous woodblocks from the treaty port of Yokohama and its foreign inhabitants. Tokyo Modern, 1928 to 1940. These are expressionist woodblocks of a city as it tries to define itself as modern after the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923. And then I have Ground Zero, 1945, which are hibakusha survivor visual depictions of their time and the essence of what still haunts them from Hiroshima in 1945. The students that I serve are secondary. They're mostly inquisitive and intelligent and engaging. Some are low functioning and some are less motivated than others. I serve about 20% second or third language learners. The courses I've embedded this website in: U.S. History 2, all the time in the World War II unit, Contemporary East Asia through the Arts, geography classes on human geography in East Asia, Tokugawa Japan, and Race and Hate in the Pacific War. For each of these units that I address with you, I'm going to show you the home page so that you can see the tabs themselves and think of those as kind of your digital textbook. After Commodore Perry opens Japan with the Harris Treaty, Japan ends up allowing Westerners access to its resources and really agrees to low tariffs on its duties. We even have a lesson on the Harris Treaty here. Yokohama is a city that's directly south of Tokyo, and it's the second biggest city in Japan today. And it was one of the cities in which the emperor allowed the foreigners to live. There are woodblock artists from Japan who captured the intricacies of these complicated and curious and bizarre societies of foreigners in these port cities and their economies and their interactions between the Japanese and the Westerners. On Yokohama Boomtown specifically, we have excellent curriculum based on how do you read a woodblock print, how do you interpret the Harris Treaty as a primary source, creating a cultural exchange, looking at the cultural exchanges between the Westerners and the Japanese, and how do you create a guide to the foreigners? In the visual narrative, specifically in Yokohama Boomtown, students get to pan through horizontally and they get to analyze some of these woodblocks as they're laid out. They're also engaged with questions and hints so they can kind of navigate through these parts of the website without you. You do not have to stand over your students' shoulders to look at this. They can do a fantastic job without you. Here you see a bird's eye view of the port community where the foreigners live. The visual narratives also walk the students through the visuals, aiding them with simple hints and questions, kind of trying to trigger their engagement if they don't have it already. Here, the flag of most of the foreigners are represented, though they're not often depicted accurately. If you think about it, the woodblock artists probably went and observed everything they could in the port, and then they went home to their studio and tried to remember what they saw, and that's why a lot of these flags are off, which is really interesting to look at. Moving right as you scroll, there are questions to engage your students. Who were the 5 nations that Japan had treaties with? Here you've got the 5 nations depicted through their flags and their dignitaries. The Chinese are also there too because they played a significant role in trade. When I use this in my classroom, I work off of lesson 4, which is asking the kids to generate a cross-cultural training guide. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, A through F show all the different ways in which I can assign a group a specific vantage point on this experience. Kids will analyze the wood blocks in this unit, and they'll be able to assess and decide what was it like to be part of that culture. You do need a computer lab for this, but other than that, everything else is supplied for you in the curriculum unit. Every student has a responsibility in these groups. No one gets to slide on these curriculum lesson plans. All kids are held accountable for knowing the material because they'll have a separate summative assessment at the end. In this lesson plan specifically, we asked students to create a PowerPoint to present to the rest of the class on what it was like to understand a little bit more of another kind of culture. This is a really neat way to get kids to approach history through the lens of art and through their own interpretation of what they're seeing. Tokyo Modern. This is a beautifully laid out unit on the rebirth of Tokyo as a modern city after the Kanto earthquake of 1923. 140,000 people actually lost their lives and 2 million people were displaced. Within the next 20 years, the government and city officials tried to figure out how were they going to define themselves in the modern world. When they decided to talk about what does modernity look like, this is what Tokyo looked like. This is how Tokyo was rebuilt. We have the opportunity to see it through the lens of some really interesting woodblock artists. Several artists document this changing city and how it tried to define itself through woodblocks. The woodblocks are unique to this time period. They carry a sense of commitment to the city's change, and they really have the influence of Expressionism, just like it's in Germany at the same time. A great element within this unit are the visual narratives, and the web builders decided to create 18 pathways through this artist Koizumi and his version of what Tokyo looked like over those 12 years. This is a great website for your students. It's laid out according to specific elements you would find in a city. Let's look at a couple. Infrastructure. You could generate essential questions for your students to answer as they travel through some of these pathways of urbanism and industrialism. You could ask them, what elements do you see that makes this city modern? How is Tokyo defining itself as modern? What elements do you not see? How can you compare this to where you live today? Kids have to gather evidence from the text as well as from the visual narratives, the woodblock prints, so this is a great example of how the Common Core asks us to cite specific textual evidence from what we're reading or interpreting. Parks and public spaces. You can ask lower aged or lower ability students if they can identify or relate with what they're seeing in these images. What was important to Japan, the city officials, as they rebuilt the city? How did they engage recreation and entertainment? Students can also compare and contrast Koizumi's style here with other artists from the 1930s. You can see a lot of evidence of the expressionists of Germany at the same time period. This is a great lens into a time period in history. If you think about it, this was a modern city that was built that no longer exists because it was wiped out in the incendiary bombings of March of 1945 during World War II. Your more advanced learners could also draw connections between what are the decisions these city officials made and their demise in 1945. Other students could also compare how cities who have suffered similarly devastating natural disasters have chose to rebuild themselves as well. When I use Tokyo Modern in my classroom, I've asked students to develop an art gallery. First, they do have to look at the complex and tragic story of the earthquake itself, which is documented in this unit really well through pictures and illustrations and photographs and stories. Then they also have to show the effect. How do the city officials want to rebuild themselves? How do they define modernity in the 1930s? All my students had to cite textual resources and evidence as well from the text. Ground Zero is a unit that I use often and I find tremendously powerful in the classroom. This is the best way that I know how to show the true sense of destruction and loss and post-apocalyptic Japan in World War II. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum encouraged hibakusha, or survivors, to illustrate their memories of that August in 1945. Starting in 1974, survivors were asked to document a picture in any way that they knew how to depict about a scene that still haunts them from that time period. The Japanese Broadcasting Corporation in Hiroshima started compiling all of these visuals and these primary sources, and they ended up with thousands. I need to warn you that using Ground Zero is thoroughly disturbing. It should be. The visuals that you're going to see here, even though they're illustrations, are graphic and horrifying. But I need to also say that this is the best way to encourage our students to be 21st century learners and to be contemplative and thoughtful when they're talking about global discussions and dialogues around weaponry and war. If you have time, you could also use in your classroom the anime feature Barefoot Gen, which is a manga or anime, Gen, or you could also use Miyazaki's Grave of the Fireflies, which is a movie that talks about the experiences of the citizens in Kobe, Japan, as they were bombed by Americans using incendiary weapons. I ask students to investigate nuclear war from below the mushroom cloud, not above. I don't ask whether this was a just or legitimate action. I ask rather, what do nuclear weapons say about us as a society? What are the personal effects of nuclear war? Ground Zero shows kids a new lens into individual experiences. Japan is the only country to have been attacked by nuclear weapons. Not once, but twice. No textbook can offer what Ground Zero offers your students, guaranteed. In my World War II unit in U.S. history, I make this argument. I'm not going to ask you guys to debate whether we were warranted or justified in dropping 2 nuclear bombs over the cities in Japan in 1945. It's a moot point, and it doesn't help you with your sophisticated dialogue I'm expecting you to engage in as adults and as citizens of this world. Instead, I ask students, I need you to generate new, authentic questions. What should we be asking your generation to learn 70 years later about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Guaranteed, if you use this website and you ask the students to generate their own new questions, you will have way more profound and authentic conversations with them. Students do an excellent job dissecting the material in this site as well. They do honor the sensitivity of the imagery. Here are some pieces of the Common Core standards that I referenced throughout this presentation. And I just want to leave you with this thought. Teachers are super creative. There are really a lot of ways that you can use this website with your students, even if you don't teach the context or even if you're not a social studies teacher. You can use this in an art history class, ELL, or a literacy class, or an English language arts class. You can use this in any kind of human geography class or a class even about contemporary Asia, and you want to zoom back and look at how Asia has gotten to where it is today. Please feel free to shoot me any ideas, questions, or suggestions. Thanks for watching.